when somebody calls Social Security a Ponzi scheme, especially him with his power, that means that program is under threat. When veterans are fired from their jobs, we have so many veterans that after they serve, they go to the federal government. They get a government job, a good job. Veterans are well equipped to do these jobs. They're mission oriented. They work hard. They've already served their country. This is a second opportunity for them to do that. These are valuable employees. I had about a dozen of them in my office a few weeks ago. One guy was a disabled veteran. He had recently received a performance report that said he was doing great. 3 weeks later, he gets an email from Elon Musk, and he's fired for poor performance. This guy told me this has ruined his life. He had kids.
Señores, hoy vamos a hablar de algo que realmente yo creo que debería estar preocupándonos a todos, ¿no? Y es el peligro de las decisiones impulsivas que se está tomando dentro del gobierno de Trump y cómo todas estas estarían afectando directamente a dos sectores importantes: seguridad nacional y derechos de los ciudadanos. Estamos hablando desde despidos masivos de veteranos hasta la filtración reciente de información militar, que yo creo que hay mucho de qué hablar. Y pues sí, lógicamente, en todo esto está el gabinete de Trump junto a Elon Musk. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Señores, hoy veremos cómo Mark Kelly, el senador de Arizona, ha destrozado a todo este gabinete de incompetentes que están rodeando a Donald Trump. Así que los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque veremos los detalles, veremos la entrevista que está muy, pero muy interesante. Pues bueno amigos, en una entrevista reciente vimos al senador Mark Kelly de Arizona abordando temas muy cruciales, desde la influencia de lo que es Elon Musk en todo el discurso político, en toda esta narrativa, hasta la impactante filtración de información militar muy sensible por parte del secretario de Defensa de Donald Trump, que es Pete Hegseth, ¿no? Seguramente ya habrán escuchado en otros lugares sobre esta noticia. Pero lo interesante fue que también tocó temas que vienen arraigados a esto, que es el despido masivo de veteranos, la eliminación de ayuda humanitaria. Y bueno, primero quiero que veamos un fragmento de toda esta entrevista. Quiero que se tomen el tiempo de leer todo lo que se dice. Y luego vamos a analizar los puntos más importantes para que de este modo no les quede más duda de estas decisiones impulsivas que está tomando Donald Trump. Así que pongamos el clip.
And joining me now is Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, member of the Armed Services Committee. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
It's a little weird to be called a traitor, I think, by Elon Musk twice. What's your response?
Well, he's the richest guy in the world. When I was flying combat missions over Iraq, and he was probably a teenager, I didn't think, a guy from South Africa, richest man in the world, would call me that. But I will say I'm not really bothered by it. But what really bothers me, it's not what he says, it's what he's doing. And I have really, grave concerns about seniors in my state. When somebody calls Social Security a Ponzi scheme, especially him with his power, that means that program is under threat. When veterans are fired from their jobs, we have so many veterans that after they serve, they go to the federal government. They get a government job, a good job. Veterans are well equipped to do these jobs. They're mission oriented. They work hard. They've already served their country. This is a second opportunity for them to do that. These are valuable employees. I had about a dozen of them in my office a few weeks ago. One guy was a disabled veteran. He had recently received a performance report that said he was doing great. 3 weeks later, he gets an email from Elon Musk, and he's fired for poor performance. This guy told me this has ruined his life. He had kids. He was about to start a minimum wage job.
That point you made, the federal judge, the district judge who's overseeing the lawsuit about this firing, one of the points the judge made was, first of all, they know it wasn't for poor performance. They used it as a loophole.
Right.
But second of all, you now have this black mark. They know it's a lie, but you now have been fired for performance. So you now have to answer on your next job interview. Have you been fired for performance?
Right.
What happened at your last job?
Yeah.
With this essentially lie that the Doge boys cooked up.
Yeah, well, you know, hopefully these folks will be able to explain it. Hey, I'm in this huge group, especially if you're a veteran. He fired at least 6,000 veterans. That's the last time I checked. That was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe those folks will be able to talk about that. But you're right. This is not helpful for them. And it is one sad story after the next, and it's not making us more efficient. If you're talking about the E is efficiency and Doge, try to figure out where do we have redundancy? Where do we have programs that aren't necessary? U.S. government aid, the food aid that we send to starving kids, the support for programs that help strengthen democracies in other nations, that's money. If we don't spend that money, at some point we're going to have to spend more money on bullets.
That point you just made, I want to stay on this for a second. You know, one of the things I've seen is like, look, USAID may be good, but it's kind of people, they're skeptical of foreign aid, and you can't really make the case. You're a senator who's in a swing state, a hotly contested state. Like, do you feel like you can just talk to people, whatever their politics are, and make a affirmative case for why USAID is actually important and shouldn't be shuttered?
Well, we're the richest nation in the history of the world. There are starving children all across this planet. I've been in a refugee camp in the DRC, in the Congo, and seeing starving kids. And these are kids that are now in a camp where there was care and UNICEF and food aid that comes from USAID. And some of them, I remember this baby with the distended belly. And I asked the doctor, well, this kid's going to be okay. And he said, not this kid. Those kids over there, because we got here in time, because they got here in time, this baby here will die. And if that food aid wasn't there, these other kids would have died as well. There are kids in Sudan and in other countries across the planet right now that are dying because Donald Trump and Elon Musk decided to stop this aid. And that hurts us. That makes these places less stable. When you have instability, and it might seem like to most Americans it's in a faraway place and it doesn't affect us. The Russians are there in Africa. The Chinese are there in Africa. They are promoting this chaos in these foreign places. Ultimately, that spreads to the rest of the part of the world, and we wind up, as the United States of America, trying to help in these conflicts, and that does affect us.
Let me ask you another question about national security. I was struck by this very well-reported piece in the Times about the Signal chat leak. This was talking to particularly military pilots about their reaction to it. One former senior Defense Department official with military experience said Mr. Hegseth's test describing launch times and the type of strike aircraft was indeed classified information that could have jeopardized pilots' lives if it had been released or obtained. I saw a few viral TikToks of military spouses expressing rage about this. What do you think as a former naval aviator yourself? Who
had to walk out to an airplane in the middle of the night to go on a strike like this when Dick Cheney was Secretary of Defense, I think. Never for 1 second did I think the Secretary of Defense was going to put me at risk. And it is significant risk. They're saying this wasn't classified. This is the most sensitive information we have in the military. When you're going to send service members, troops, pilots, feet dry in this case, over land in a contested area where they have a significant surface-to-air missile capability.
They
have SA-3s, SA-6s.
Yeah.
I've been an SA-6 blow up next to my airplane on my first combat mission.
Wow.
That missile can shoot down an F-18 without a doubt. If they know you're coming, when you're coming, the direction you're coming from, and on top of that, the time on target, they know to have all their resources focused on shooting you down. And that helps them significantly. So, of course, these pilots are upset about it. Pete Hegseth put them at significant risk. He crossed a line no Secretary of Defense should ever cross, and he needs to be held accountable for this.
What do you make of the lying? I really find this part, in some ways, some of the most unnerving. I mean, to say it's not classified, it's like, well, the timing and of a surprise.
I'm not even sure what they mean by that. Maybe they meant because it doesn't say secret or top secret on the signal chain.
Right, but of course it is.
Of course it is. It came off of a piece of paper that probably said top secret at the top, or he got it over the phone from the head of CENTCOM, the combatant commander, that said, here's, and by the way, you look at the times, it wasn't around a certain time. It's like 15:16, 3:16 p.m., or 14:10, which is 2:10 p.m. These are exact times that came from a plan. Now they're saying, well, these aren't war plans. I'll give them that. I mean, a war plan would be joint forces.
Sure, yeah.
It would include allies. This is a strike plan. These plans, by the way, are also planned by those pilots that are in the cockpit. So they planned the strike.
Right.
They communicated it to leadership. It got approved. And then the Secretary of Defense decides to throw it out on an unsecured platform, which, by the way, could have gotten to the Russians, could have gotten to the Iranians, and ultimately to the Houthis.
It also struck me that Jim Himes, Democratic congressman, said this the other day, that, like, there was no real reason to do it. That it was almost kind of showing off. Like, he didn't have to send that
100%.
way, right? Is that right?
Or he could have sent it afterwards.
Right.
If that would have come out 15 minutes after those airplanes got back to the aircraft carrier, those guys were safely aboard. If you want to send that stuff out, fine. That information is not valuable to anybody anymore, not really. But to do it beforehand is such a disservice to what these guys are about to do. And I'm confident, I'm sure their spouses are upset. It is risky to go fly an airplane into enemy territory and try to get bombs on target and then get out before you get shot down. And now you have the guy in the highest position in DOD is making that job potentially making that job so much harder for you.
There is reporting today that he's hired his brother at the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth,
To do,
liaison, I think, is what he's
what's
doing.
his brother's background?
I think he might have had a podcast company. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what it was.
So, yeah, this
is a guy who said he's going to bring Merritt back to the Department of Defense, fired the chair of the Joint Chiefs because he was too woke, I guess. Black man who talked about being black in America.
Yeah.
And do you think he's restoring merit to the Department of Defense?
With hiring his brother, who probably needed a job, or maybe gave him a raise from his previous job, or wants to have his brother around. How could his brother possibly be the most qualified job for whatever this is? Whatever this job happens to be. It's not his brother. If you need somebody in this position, advertise the position and find the most qualified person. This is the Department of Defense we're talking about. This is the organization that keeps all of us safe.
Ok, amigos, empecemos por lo primero. Elon Musk llamando traidor a un senador veterano que sirvió en combate. ¿No les parece irónico que alguien que nació en Sudáfrica, alguien que se hizo multimillonario gracias a contratos con el gobierno estadounidense, tenga el descaro de acusar de traición a alguien que literalmente, señores, ha arriesgado su vida por el país? Más allá del tema del insulto, ¿no?, de la falta de respeto, lo preocupante, señores, es su influencia en el discurso político. Elon Musk no es solo un empresario, es alguien con poder de moldear una narrativa entera, de generar ataques hacia figuras políticas que no le convienen. Su postura contra, por ejemplo, el programa del Seguro Social, ¿no?, es peligrosa, señores. Da pie a que la derecha radical lo ponga realmente en la mira para su eliminación. Ahora saltemos a los despidos masivos de veteranos. Esto, amigos, es simplemente escandaloso. Hablamos de 6,000 veteranos despedidos de todos sus trabajos sin razón válida. ¿Cuál fue la excusa? Bajo rendimiento. Muchos de ellos, señores, tenían evaluaciones impecables. Ojo, toda la información es pública. Aquí viene un detalle que lo hace más interesante. Despedir a un veterano con una mentira sobre su rendimiento profesional significa que su futuro laboral queda comprometido. Amigos, la administración de Trump, con el apoyo de gente como Elon Musk, no están limpiando el gobierno. Están desmantelando la estabilidad laboral de quienes sirvieron al país. ¿No era acaso Donald Trump el que se estuvo vendiendo como el presidente y que también iba a apoyar a los veteranos? Hipocresía total. Sigamos con la filtración de información militar por parte de Pete Hegseth. Seguramente ustedes ya habrán escuchado sobre esto. Este secretario de Defensa, ex presentador de Fox News. A ver, amigos, esto no es una simple equivocación. Hablamos de información clasificada sobre ataques militares, hablamos de información que traería horarios exactos, detalles estratégicos. Hablamos de información que si caen en las manos equivocadas, esto podría costar vidas. Lo más indignante es esta excusa barata, ¿no? No era información clasificada. Claro. No por nada tenía un sello de top secret, ¿no? Y en rojo. Pero era información que en mano de enemigos representaba un riesgo no bastante para ellos, supuestamente, ¿no? Y es un riesgo directo para pilotos y soldados en el terreno. Si un secretario de defensa filtra detalles operativos en una plataforma insegura, de esta manera tan absurda, es como si ustedes estén hablando por WhatsApp. Amigos, es simplemente ridículo. No existe otra palabra que pueda describir semejante tontería. Le está facilitando el trabajo a los enemigos de Estados Unidos. Aquí no estamos hablando de un error de novato. Es un acto irresponsable. Este acto podría traer consecuencias catastróficas. ¿Ustedes creen que esto simplemente debería ser un reproche? Porque imagino que en otro gobierno, por lo menos, este hombre ya hubiera sido despedido en ese instante. ¿Cuál fue la respuesta de Donald Trump? Contratar al hermano de Pete Hegseth en el Departamento de Defensa. ¿Qué credenciales tiene? Básicamente ninguna. Pero hey, la meritocracia, ¿no? Donald Trump premiando la lealtad. No la competencia y no el buen trabajo. Amigos, ¿qué nos deja todo esto? Primero, Elon Musk no solo está usando su plataforma para esparcir esta ideología ultraconservadora, sino que también al parecer está jugando con vida de los más vulnerables, ¿no? Como los veteranos que han servido al país. Segundo, la administración de Donald Trump sigue siendo este desastre cuando hablamos de seguridad nacional. Funcionarios irresponsables manejando información sensible sin recibir ningún tipo de consecuencia. Y tercero, que la corrupción y el nepotismo sigue siendo esta norma dentro de su círculo de poder. La pregunta es, ¿cómo es posible que se continúe permitiendo esto? ¿Ustedes creen que la filtración de información militar debería de tener consecuencias más graves? ¿Qué piensan ustedes del despido masivo de veteranos? Los invito a que me dejen sus comentarios, sus opiniones. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Como siempre, apóyame dándome un like, compartiendo este video con tus amigos y suscribiéndote a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.